What simple thing can accidentally end your life? Story 1. My grandmother's kitchen was a sanctuary. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, measured by the ticking of a rooster-shaped wall clock and the constant aroma of fresh bread or some cake baking in the oven. I vividly remember the linoleum floor, cool under my bare feet on hot summer days, and the sunlight that streamed through the window, illuminating the dust particles that danced in the air. It was my safe place. And in the corner of that safe place, almost like a forgotten piece of scenery, was the potato box. It was nothing special. To a 10-year-old boy, it was perhaps the least interesting object in the entire universe. It was a rustic wooden box, about the size of a small trash can, with a heavy lid that fit snugly on top. It had a dark, worn wood finish, with splinters here and there, and it gave off a perpetual smell of damp earth. For years, it had just been there. I'd walk past it dozens of times a day on my way to grab a glass of juice or a freshly baked cookie. It was just the potato box, a name as literal as its function. To me, it might as well have been invisible. What interest could a child possibly have in looking at a bunch of old potatoes? Until one day, curiosity got the better of me. I can't recall the exact reason why. Maybe it was the deep boredom of a summer afternoon with nothing to do, or perhaps my childish imagination had decided for a brief moment that this box didn't just hold potatoes but a hidden treasure, a family secret, or a portal to another world. It was silly, I know, but a 10-year-old's mind works in mysterious ways. I remember approaching it with an almost ceremonial solemnity, as if I were about to uncover a great mystery. I knelt on the cool floor. The earthy smell was stronger there, mixed with something else, a sweet and slightly rancid odor that I couldn't quite identify. I placed my hands on the wooden lid. It was heavier than I'd imagined. With a grunt of effort, I lifted it. The sound of creaking wood broke the kitchen's silence. I leaned forward, eager to peek at the treasure. I saw nothing. The darkness inside the box was almost total. The smell, however, hit me like an invisible wall. It was dense, humid, and nauseating. Before my brain could even process what was happening, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The sound of the rooster clock seemed to fade into the distance, muffled. The edges of my vision darkened, closing in like a tunnel. The last thing I felt was the linoleum floor rising up to meet me. The next thing I knew was pain. A sharp, burning pain in my chest, as if someone had poured fire into my lungs. I was lying on my side on the kitchen floor, the afternoon sun now lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room. I tried to take a deep breath, but each inhalation was a battle, an effort that brought a fresh wave of agony. Panic began to set in. I tried to call for my grandmother, but the only sound that came out was a hoarse, wheezing gasp. Tears were streaming down my face, but I couldn't get enough air to actually cry. For what felt like an eternity, I lay there, paralyzed by pain and fear, convinced I was going to die on my grandmother's kitchen floor. Eventually, the pain subsided enough that I could crawl and, finally, cry for help. My grandmother came running, her face a mask of panic. She never understood what happened, and neither did I to her. I had probably just tripped and hit my head. To me, the potato box became a malevolent entity. For the rest of my childhood, I would take a wide berth to avoid it. I never went near it again. The incident remained a scary, unsolved mystery in my mind. The answer only came years later, as an adult, while I was randomly scrolling the internet. I stumbled upon a comment in a forum, almost by chance, describing the dangers of the gases released by decaying potatoes in enclosed spaces. It talked about glycocaloids, solanine, and how, in sufficient concentrations, the gas can displace oxygen and cause asphyxiation, unconsciousness, and even death. The comment mentioned a 2013 news article about an entire family in Russia who died, one by one as they went down into a cellar to rescue the others, all of them victims of the same silent killer that had been hiding in my grandmother's potato box. In that moment, my blood ran cold. The dizziness, the fainting, the burning pain in my chest, it all made sense. That sweet, rancid smell was the smell of death. I hadn't just tripped, I hadn't imagined it. At 10 years old, on a lazy, sunny afternoon, I had opened a simple wooden box and, by sheer luck, had not become another victim. Story 2. I've always considered myself fairly knowledgeable about the outdoors, at least in a casual, suburban kind of way. I can identify a maple leaf. I know what poison ivy looks like, and I understand that you shouldn't eat brightly colored berries you find on a hike. These are the basics, the kind of common sense rules you absorb as a kid. But for a long time, one of the most lethal killers in the plant kingdom was hiding in plain sight, lining the highways, decorating the backyards of my neighbors, and even blooming cheerfully outside my own office building. I'm talking about oleander. To me, it was just a pretty shrub, hardy, drought-resistant, with beautiful clusters of pink, white, or red flowers. It's so common here in California that it becomes part of the landscape as background noise, a plant so ubiquitous you stop seeing it. Its branches are another notable feature, long, straight, and sturdy. They look, to the untrained eye, absolutely perfect for things like roasting marshmallows or hot dogs over a campfire. This innocent observation is precisely what turns this decorative plant into a deadly trap. My true education on the subject came from a woman I used to know, a brilliant biologist with a PhD who had a knack for dropping terrifying facts into casual conversation. We were at a barbecue one summer evening, watching some kids toast marshmallows over a small fire pit. One of the dads had just snapped a few branches off a nearby hedge to use as skewers. My friend froze, her eyes wide. She calmly walked over, took the sticks from the children, and replaced them with wire hangers she'd procured from the host. She then quietly explained to the father that the hedge he'd chosen was oleander, and that he had been seconds away from poisoning a group of children. That night, she told me the whole story. The sap inside the oleander branches is a potent poison, a cocktail of cardiac glycosides. When you heat that branch over a fire, the sap liquefies and leaches out, seeping directly into whatever food you're cooking. The hot dog or marshmallow becomes a sponge for the toxin. Even the smoke from burning oleander is poisonous. Ingesting it can cause severe vomiting, blurred vision, a dangerously slowed heart rate, and eventually, cardiac arrest. She told me that, according to her information, something like 20 children die every year in California alone from this exact scenario. 20 kids, from roasting marshmallows. That number has stuck with me ever since. While the exact figure might fluctuate year to year, the underlying horror remains. A classic, joyful childhood activity turned into a fatal mistake by a simple lack of knowledge. The lesson was seared into my brain, and I started seeing oleander everywhere. The world suddenly felt a little more dangerous. It was a few years later that this knowledge was put to the test by my sister. She was driving home from work, stuck in the typical rush hour traffic, when she saw something on the sidewalk that made her blood run cold. A mother was pushing her baby in a stroller. The child, probably no more than a year or two old, was happily clutching a beautiful, vibrant pink flower. My sister watched as the mother, smiling, picked another flower from the large public hedge she was standing next to and handed it to the toddler. It was an oleander hedge. The baby was doing what all babies do, bringing the pretty new object directly to its mouth. Traffic was at a standstill. My sister, without a second thought, laid on her horn, yanked her steering wheel, and made a frantic, illegal U-turn across the median. Horns blared around her, but she didn't care. She pulled her car right up onto the curb next to the stunned mother. Leaning out the window, she probably looked like a madwoman. "The flower," she yelled, trying not to sound completely unhinged. "It's poisonous. It can kill your baby. Please, take it away from him." The mother, initially defensive and frightened, looked from my sister's panicked face to the flower in her child's hand. Something in my sister's sheer desperation must have convinced her. She quickly snatched the flower away from the baby, who immediately started to cry. My sister took a deep breath and explained, as calmly as she could, what the plant was and just how dangerous it was. The mother's face went from annoyance to pale-faced horror as the realization sunk in. She had been unknowingly handing her child a loaded gun. That incident reinforces the core lesson for me. Don't pick plants if you don't know what they are, and especially, never give them to a child young enough to put them in their mouth. We fill our homes and gardens with beautiful things that can be incredibly dangerous. We have dumb cane, philodendron, daffodils, all common houseplants that can be toxic, even deadly if ingested. We've become so detached from the natural world that we've forgotten it. It's not always benign. Beauty can be a warning sign, and sometimes the most simple, innocent-looking flower can hide the most terrible secret. Story 3. Grief is a strange club that no one wants to join. The meetings were held in the basement of a community center. A room with fluorescent lights that hummed and cast a sterile, unflattering glow on everything. We'd sit in a circle of mismatched, uncomfortable chairs, sipping weak coffee from styrofoam cups. The air was always thick with unspoken words, with the kind of heavy silence that only a shared, profound loss can create. I was there for my own reasons, grappling with my own ghost. In that room, everyone's story was different, yet the geography of our pain was hauntingly similar. For weeks, a woman named Carol had sat across from me. She was a quiet woman, probably in her late 50s, with kind eyes that seemed to hold a permanent sadness. She rarely spoke, mostly just listening and nodding, offering a tissue to someone else, when the tears inevitably came. We learned about each other in fragments, in the brief introductions at the start of each session. I knew she had lost her son, that was all. Then one evening, the facilitator asked if anyone wanted to share something that had been on their mind. The room was silent for a long moment, and then Carol cleared her throat. The sound was so small it was almost startling. In a soft, steady voice, she began to speak, and the story she told has never left me. Her son David was 24. She spoke of him in the present tense at first, a common habit in our circle. "He's a good kid," she'd say. "He works in it, loves hiking, and has this goofy laugh that can fill a whole house." She painted a picture of a vibrant young man with his entire life stretching out before him. A few months before he died, he started complaining of a toothache. It was a molar in the back, an impacted wisdom tooth that had never been removed. Like most young men who think they're invincible, he brushed it off. It was just a toothache. He was busy with work. He didn't have great dental insurance. He'd take some ibuprofen and deal with it later. Carol told us she'd nagged him, of course, the way mothers do. Go to the dentist, David. He'd promised he would, but later never came. The pain got worse. His jaw started to swell. He developed a fever he couldn't shake. He became tired, lethargic. He thought he had the flu. By the time he finally collapsed, the infection had already won the war. At the hospital, the doctors were initially puzzled. It wasn't until they did a brain scan that they found it. The abscess from that ignored, impacted tooth had festered. The bacteria creating a pathway, tunneling silently and relentlessly upward until it breached the blood-brain barrier. The infection had seeded itself in his brain. Carol's voice cracked as she described the final days. The confusion, the seizures, the terrifying speed with which her strong, healthy son was taken from her. She spoke of the utter helplessness of sitting by his hospital bed, holding his hand while machines breathed for him, all because of a tooth. A simple, common, treatable toothache. He never woke up. Hearing her story in that quiet room changed something in me. We think of death as this big, dramatic event, car crash, a heart attack, a terrible disease. We don't think of it as something that can start in a tiny, rotting crevice in a tooth and quietly poison you from the inside out. It introduced a new, intimate kind of fear. It was a visceral reminder of our own fragility, that the complex machinery of our bodies can be brought down by the smallest, most mundane failure. Now, that fear is tinged with a specific kind of anger. I see these videos online, these so-called veneer techs operating out of their homes, offering cheap cosmetic dentistry. They have no medical training, no understanding of pathology. They just glue a layer of bright white composite over people's teeth. And all I can think of is David. I picture one of these people looking at a tooth with a bit of decay, a looming infection, and seeing nothing but an imperfect canvas. I see them cheerfully entombing that decay under a flawless veneer, sealing it in, creating the perfect, oxygen-free environment for an abscess to bloom. They are, in their ignorance, creating the very time bomb that killed Carol's son. They aren't just being irresponsible. They are dealing in something that can be lethal. Carol's story stripped away any innocence I had about dental health. It's not about a pretty smile. It's about life and death. And now, I can't even hear someone complain of a toothache without hearing her quiet, heartbroken voice in that sterile basement room, telling us how her whole world ended. Story 4: You never truly understand the anatomy of fear until you become a parent. The world, which was once just a place you lived in, transforms into a landscape of sharp corners, unsecured dressers, and countless tiny objects that could end a life. For my wife and me, the most terrifying object wasn't a knife or a bottle of bleach. It was a grape. That small, sweet, perfectly sized sphere of fruit became a symbol of just how quickly everything can be taken away. The reason for our vigilance began with a story from my wife's work. She had a friend, a co-worker she was close with, who experienced the worst thing I can possibly imagine. She was at home with her mother and her young daughter, just a toddler. It was a normal afternoon. They gave the little girl some grapes as a snack. One moment she was happily eating, the next, she was silent. The grape had lodged perfectly in her throat, creating a flawless seal. What followed was the kind of frantic primal panic that haunts my nightmares. Two capable adults, her mother and her grandmother, were right there, and they were utterly powerless. They tried to dislodge it, turning her upside down, slapping her back, trying to sweep it out with their fingers. But the grape wouldn't move. The silence was the worst part of the story my wife relayed to me. The little girl couldn't cry, couldn't cough, couldn't make a sound. She was just wide-eyed terror, fading to blue. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. They managed to restart her heart, but her brain had been starved of oxygen for too long. She was gone. After hearing that, we became militant. We cut our kids' grapes in half, and then into quarters, long after their friends were eating them whole. We did it until they were nearly 10 years old, enduring their eye rolls and complaints, because the image of that co-worker's silent kitchen was seared into our minds. But for me, the fear was more than just secondhand. It was a ghost from my own past, a story that my family told for years as a piece of dark, chaotic folklore. I was 2 years old, at a massive family party. The memory isn't mine, of course, but a collage of retellings from every aunt and uncle. It was a summer day, the air thick with the smell of charcoal and cut grass. The adults were laughing, music was playing, and I, a toddler on a mission, made my way to the picnic table. My eyes landed on the fruit salad, a treasure chest of bright, glistening jewels. I plunged my chubby fist in and came up with a big, purple grape. I popped it in my mouth. It was sweet, and then it was stuck. Just like the little girl in the story, I went silent. My parents, busy talking to someone, didn't notice at first. My face started to change color. Panic began to ripple through the adults as they realized what was happening. They froze. A crowd of people rendered useless by shock, all except for one. My Aunt Nancy. Aunt Nancy was, by all accounts, a glorious mess that day. She was, as the legend goes, 10 natty lights deep, and had been loud and goofy all afternoon. She was the fun aunt, but also the one you had to keep an eye on. In that moment of sheer terror, however, some kind of switch flipped in her brain. While everyone else was shouting or staring, she barreled through the crowd, her drunken state seemingly burning away the panic that paralyzed everyone else. She knew exactly what to do. She grabbed my tiny 2-year-old body, wrapped her arms around my torso, and performed a surprisingly perfect Heimlich maneuver. On the second thrust, the grape shot out of my mouth and across the lawn. It was followed by a huge, gasping, screaming breath. I was crying. Everyone was crying or shouting with relief. And Aunt Nancy, the drunkest person at the party, was suddenly the hero. She had saved my life. She passed away a few years ago. R.I.P. Aunt Nancy. For the rest of her life, she was the woman who saved me. It was her defining moment in our family's history. And her act of heroism is inextricably linked to the co-worker's tragedy in my mind. They are two sides of the same horrifying coin. One story is about the sudden senseless loss that can happen in the blink of an eye. The other is about the improbable, messy, beautiful luck of being saved by the most unexpected person. Both stories are why I will never, ever look at a grape the same way again. Story 5. There's a different kind of weight to the job when you work in a rural or in a big city. Patients are often anonymous faces, a stream of humanity you patch up and send on their way. Out here, you know these people. I've delivered their babies. I've set their kids' broken arms. I've had coffee next to them at the town diner. When they come through those ambulance bay doors, they aren't just a patient in trauma bay too. They're the guy who owns the hardware store, or the high school quarterback, or your own kid's science teacher. And when you lose one of them, that loss echoes through the whole community. After 30 years of it, the ghosts of the ones you couldn't save, especially the ones who didn't have to die, tend to stick with you. People think the ER is all dramatic, life-saving heroics. And sometimes it is. But mostly, it's a long, grinding parade of human error. A showcase of the thousand simple, stupid ways a perfectly good day can turn into the worst day of someone's life. I think about the kids at parties. When I started, a kid at a party meant alcohol poisoning. Nasty, but usually treatable. We'd pump their stomach, give them fluids, and send them home with a lecture. Then, things changed. The calls started coming in for kids who were just unconscious, not breathing. They'd taken one pill, something they thought was Xanax or Oxy, at a concert or a bonfire, but it was laced with fentanyl. There is no lecture for that. You just do CPR until you can't anymore, and then you have to walk into a waiting room and tell a parent that their 17-year-old is either gone or will be a vegetable for the rest of their life because of one mistake. The finality of it is absolute. Cars are the other great destroyer out here. People feel so safe inside that 2-ton steel cage, they forget they're piloting a missile. I've seen what happens when that illusion shatters. IV held a teenage girl's hand while she died because she was texting and drifted across the center line. IV had to pronounce a father of 3 dead at the scene of a drunk driving accident he caused. And I'll never forget the sheer visceral horror of a kid who was sticking his head out the window of a moving car when it sideswiped a mailbox. There's no fixing that. It's not an injury. It's an obliteration, and it's not just driving. The saddest calls are the ones on a Sunday morning. A jogger finds a body in a ditch along the highway. Some kid got too drunk to drive, decided to walk home, and never made it. Then there are the infuriating ones. The ones that are a product of sheer, willful ignorance. I have held a child in my arms while they seized and gasped for breath. Their body rigid from tetanus because their parents were afraid of vaccines. I have watched a baby die from measles. I have zero patience for the debate anymore. I will not entertain your conspiracy theories because I have seen the real-world consequences. I have seen the tiny coffins. And it's not just kids. It's adults who should know better. The diabetic who skips their insulin for a day and comes in with their blood sugar so high their blood is like acid. The asthmatic who forgot to refill their inhaler. The person with high blood pressure who felt fine so they stopped taking their pills, right up until their heart exploded. These are such quiet, private, and utterly preventable deaths. And finally, there's the weekend warrior stuff. Saturday afternoons were a festival of power tools. Table saws versus thumbs was a classic. But the ladders, God, the ladders people have no respect for them. They'll get up on a rickety, unsecured ladder to clean their gutters, alone, with no one knowing they're even up there. They fall. Maybe it's a broken hip, maybe it's a head injury. They lie there for hours until a spouse comes home and finds them. The difference between a full recovery and death is often just having someone nearby to call. 911. The same goes for not knowing the signs of a stroke. The family brings in grandma, saying she's been acting funny all afternoon. I see the facial droop, the slurred words, and I know that every minute they waited has cost her a piece of her brain that she'll never get back. It all boils down to the same thing. Fentanyl, seatbelts, vaccines, ladders, prescriptions. It's not about fate or bad luck. It's about a single moment of carelessness, a forgotten dose, a text message you just had to answer, a simple thing. And my career was spent standing at the finish line trying to clean up the mess. Story 6. Everyone thinks they know what a house fire is like. They've seen it in the movies 100 times. You wake up in a sweat, coughing, with a terrifying orange glow flickering under your bedroom door. The roar of the flames is deafening. It's a dramatic, heart-pounding race against a visible monster, a heroic escape as the roof collapses behind you. I can tell you, After 20 years on the job, that's not how most people die. Most people die in silence, in the dark, tucked into the comfort of their own beds, without ever knowing there was a problem. The calls that haunt you aren't the massive, fully involved infernos. The ones that stick in my gut are the quiet ones. We'll get a call at 3 a.m. A neighbor saw some smoke coming from a window. We pull up and the house looks almost normal. No giant flames, no spectacle. Just a bit of lazy black smoke curling from the eaves. The house is completely dark and still. That silence is the most terrifying sound in the world because it means nobody is getting out. We force the door and go in. The heat isn't overwhelming yet, but the smoke is thick, like a physical thing. It's black and oily, and it clings to everything. The fire itself is often small, maybe even unimpressive. A smoldering couch in the living room from a dropped cigarette, an electrical short behind the drywall, a forgotten pan on the stove. It's not the roaring monster from the movies. It's a quiet, slow burn, but that quiet burn is doing something far more sinister than just consuming wood and plaster. It's manufacturing poison. A modern fire isn't just a wood fire, it's a chemical factory. It's your plastics, your foams in the couch cushions, your synthetic carpets, your particle board furniture all breaking down into a toxic soup. And the deadliest ingredient in that soup is carbon monoxide. We call it the silent killer, and that's not hyperbole. It's an assassin. It has no color, no taste, no smell. It doesn't make you choke or cough. It doesn't set off any of your body's alarm bells. It just quietly puts you to sleep. Here's what happens. You're asleep in your bed. The smoke starts to drift through the house. You breathe it in. The carbon monoxide molecules enter your lungs and flood your bloodstream. They are hundreds of times better at binding to your red blood cells than oxygen is. So, you're still breathing, but you're suffocating on a cellular level. Your brain and heart are being starved of oxygen. But you don't feel like you're suffocating, you just feel tired. Maybe you stir a little. You might feel a bit groggy or have a dull headache, like you're coming down with a cold. Your instinct isn't to panic and jump out of bed. Your instinct is to pull the covers up a little higher, roll over, and sink deeper into that comfortable, heavy sleepiness. It's a siren song. It coaxes you into a deeper and deeper unconsciousness until your breathing slows and then stops altogether. We find families in their beds that look peaceful. They look like they're just sleeping. The kids are tucked in with their teddy bears. There's no sign of a struggle. They never even knew they were in danger. They died because the one thing that could have saved them, the one thing that could have served as their electronic nose to smell the poison they couldn't, was either missing or dead itself. And that is what makes me furious. Because this death, this quiet, peaceful, horrible death, is almost entirely preventable. People will spend $1,000 on a new TV, but will forget to spend $20 on a smoke alarm. Or they'll have one, but they borrowed the battery for a video game controller months ago and forgot to replace it. A dead battery is the same as no alarm at all. So please, listen to me. This isn't just a friendly tip. This is a plea from a man who has had to carry sleeping children out of their homes knowing it was already too late. By the damn alarms, by both kinds, an ionization and a photoelectric one, because they detect different types of fires. Better yet, get a detector that also senses carbon monoxide. Put them in every bedroom and on every level of your house. Press that little test button every single month. Change the batteries twice a year when you change your clocks. Make an escape plan with your family and practice it. Have a meeting spot outside so you know everyone is safe. Your senses will not save you. You will not smell the smoke in your sleep. You will not wake up. Your only chance is a shrill, obnoxious, life-saving shriek from a little plastic disc on your ceiling. It is your only sentry against the silent killer. Story 7 Before the fall. It was just another Tuesday in January. The sky was a flat, boring gray, and the air was cold enough to make your teeth ache. I was at work, sitting at my desk, probably thinking about something incredibly mundane, like what I was going to have for lunch, or how much I was looking forward to the weekend. My life was a collection of these simple, predictable moments. It was a good life, a life I took completely for granted. I had no idea that the person I was in that moment, the man thinking about his sandwich, was about to cease to exist. The workday ended. I bundled up in my coat, said my goodbyes, and walked out to the parking lot. I didn't see the patch of black ice. 1 second, I was walking, my mind already on the drive home. The next, my feet were airborne, and the world was tilting sideways. There was a brief, disconnected moment of weightlessness, and then an impact. It wasn't a sharp pain. It was a deep, hollow, sickening thwack as the back of my skull hit the frozen asphalt. I saw a brilliant silent flash of white light behind my eyes, and then nothing at all. I came to a few seconds later, with the concerned faces of my coworkers hovering above me. The first emotion I felt wasn't pain, it was embarrassment, a deep burning humiliation. I had slipped and fallen like a cartoon character in front of everyone. "I'm fine," I insisted, trying to sit up. "Really, I'm okay." Just knocked the wind out of myself. My head was throbbing with a dull ache, but adrenaline is a powerful liar. I wanted nothing more than to get up, brush myself off, and pretend it never happened. But my manager, citing company policy, was insistent. An ambulance was called. I protested the whole time, feeling like a fraud, like I was wasting everyone's time over a clumsy slip. I remember sitting in the back of the ambulance, still feeling more foolish than injured, as they drove away from my office. And that's when my world began to unravel. The dull throb in my head started to sharpen, intensifying into a blinding, crushing pressure. It felt like my skull was being squeezed in a vice. A wave of nausea washed over me. The paramedic was asking me questions. What's your name? What year is it tanned? I knew the answers, but I couldn't make my mouth form the words. The sounds came out as a garbled mess. I could see the look on his face change from routine concern to genuine alarm. He started moving faster, shouting things to his partner up front. I felt a profound, terrifying sense of disconnect, like I was a passenger in a body that was no longer listening to me. I was aware that something was catastrophically wrong, that I was slipping away, but I couldn't do anything but watch it happen. That ambulance ride is the last thing I remember. My next memory is a blur of waking up in a hospital room. Or rather, it wasn't a memory, but a series of confusing, terrifying snapshots. The constant, rhythmic beeping of machines, the sterile smell, the raw feeling of a tube in my throat. A doctor was leaning over me, his mouth moving, but I couldn't make sense of the words. I learned later that I had a severe brain bleed. I'd been in a coma. The doctors had told my family to prepare for the worst, that I wasn't expected to survive. But I did survive. The person who woke up, however, was not the same one who had gone to work that Tuesday morning. He was gone. In his place was a stranger. Large chunks of my memory were just erased. I'd look at pictures of people I was told were my best friends and feel nothing. My emotional control was shot. I would burst into tears over a TV commercial or fly into a rage for no reason. My brain's filing system was destroyed. Making new memories became a monumental struggle. I'd have a conversation and forget it 5 minutes later. My IQ dropped significantly. The quick wit, the sharp mind I had always prided myself on, was gone. I am grieving for a man who died that day in the parking lot. I live in his house. I am married to his wife, but I am not him. And the cause of all this, the event that cleaved my life into a before and an after, wasn't some dramatic cinematic tragedy. It was a simple, stupid slip on the ice. So, when I tell you to be careful, I'm not just saying it. If you hit your head, even if you feel fine, please get to a hospital. Your brain can be bleeding, dying, while you're insisting you're okay. And for God's sake, wear a damn helmet when you're on a bike or one of those e-scooters. Your life, the very essence of who you are, is so much more fragile than you think. I'm living proof of that. And while I'm a survivor, and I'm not dead, there are days when I'm not sure who or what I am anymore.